The boy pointed at the maid and told 50 people she was going to be his mother. He said it at dinner. He said it in front of the woman his father was expected to marry, in front of her parents, in front of 3 senior advisors from Kang Min-jae's inner circle, and in front of the housekeeper who had been with the family for 11 years and had never, in all that time, seen the dining room go this quiet. The boy's name was Min-jae, Lee Min-jae, though everyone in the house called him Lee, the name his mother had chosen before she died. He was 6 years old. He had his father's eyes, dark and calm and completely certain, and he used them now to look straight across the table at the woman being presented to him as a future stepmother, then back at the maid standing near the service door with a water jug in her hands, and said it again just in case the first time hadn't landed. "She's going to be my new mom." Amia already said yes. Amia had said no such thing. She was standing very still near the service door, the water jug growing heavy in both hands, feeling the attention of every person in that dining room land on her at once. She kept her face neutral. She had practice keeping her face neutral. She set the jug down on the side table as slowly and quietly as she could and looked at the floor. At the head of the table, Kang Min-jae said nothing for 3 full seconds. Then he said, "Lee," in the particular tone that meant the conversation was over. Lee looked at his father. "But she did." "Enough." Lee fell silent, but he did not look sorry. He looked like a boy who had said exactly what he meant and was simply waiting for the adults to catch up. The woman across the table, Seo Ji-yeon, 28, from one of Seoul's 3 oldest money families, smiled the kind of smile that required significant internal effort. Her mother's fingers tightened slightly around her chopsticks. Her father cleared his throat and reached for his wine glass and said something about children and their imaginations, and slowly the room found its way back to the dinner conversation. But Seo Ji-yeon's eyes had already moved across the room to where Amia stood. She held the look for exactly 4 seconds. Then she smiled again and turned back to Min-jae with a question about business. Amia picked up the water jug and quietly refilled every glass at the table. Nobody spoke to her. Nobody looked at her again. She finished and walked back through the service door and stood in the kitchen corridor for a moment with her back against the cold wall and her eyes closed. She had been working in this house for 3 months. She had taken the position because the agency pay was good, and the location was close to her family's apartment, and the interview process had been surprisingly normal for a household this size. She had not asked who the employer was beforehand. She had found out when she arrived and saw the security detail at the gate, and the man who came to personally approve each new staff member's credentials. She had recognized Kang Min-jae's name. Most people in Seoul who paid attention to the right things recognized that name. She had decided it didn't matter. She was here to clean and to work and to save money and to go home. That was it. That was everything. Then Lee had walked up to her on her second day with a toy car in one hand and a very serious expression and asked her to help him fix the wheel that had come off, and she had sat on the floor of the playroom and fixed it, and he had watched her with those calm, certain eyes, and when she handed it back he had said thank you in the careful way of a child who had been taught that politeness matters, and she had thought, that is a very sad little boy trying very hard to be good. She had not meant to like him. She had not meant to come back to the playroom the following afternoon, or the one after that, or to start leaving a small snack on the corner of his homework table when she passed through cleaning. She had not meant for any of it. And yet, she pushed off the wall and went back to work. The next morning the household manager, a quiet, efficient woman named Mrs. Park, called Amia into her office before the first shift. The office was small and organized and smelled of the particular bleach they used on the service floors. Mrs. Park sat behind her desk with both hands folded on top of it and said, without preamble, that Miss Seo had called that morning and requested a review of the current household staff rotation. Specifically, she had made a suggestion that the maid currently assigned to the East Wing be transferred to an exterior property managed by the Kang estate 3 districts away. Amia said nothing. Mrs. Park looked at her over her reading glasses. Mr. Kang was informed. He declined the suggestion. She said it flatly as a fact, not as reassurance. Your rotation does not change. Your position is not affected. However, she paused. I thought you should know. Amia nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Park. That will be all. She went upstairs and changed the linens in the East Wing guest rooms and thought about nothing except the corners of the sheets. She had learned a long time ago that there was no point thinking about things she couldn't change. The decision had been made. She was still here. She would do her work and keep her head down, and that would be enough. It was enough for 4 days. On the 5th day, Lee appeared at the door of the room she was cleaning and said he didn't want to go with his nanny today. Amia kept straightening the pillow. You have to go to your art class. I don't want to do art. I want to stay here. Lee, you can come with me. He said it as though this was a very simple solution to a very simple problem. Then I'll go. She turned to look at him. He was standing in the doorway in his school clothes, backpack on, small face completely serious. There was something about the way he stood that always reminded her of someone trying very hard to look like they didn't need anything. She had seen that look before. She knew it from the inside. Your nanny takes you, she said carefully. That's her job. But she doesn't fix my car wheels. Lee. And she doesn't leave the crackers on my table. Amia was quiet for a moment. How do you know that's me? Because she doesn't know that orange ones are my favorite, and you always leave 2 orange ones and 4 plain ones. He said this with the absolute certainty of someone presenting undeniable evidence. I counted. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she sat down on the edge of the bed and said, Come here. He crossed the room and stood in front of her, backpack still on, waiting. You need to go with your nanny, she said gently. And I need to do my work. That's how this house works, okay? His jaw tightened. But I chose you. Lee. At dinner. I chose you. She breathed in slowly. That's not how choosing works, sweetheart. I'm not something you can choose. He looked at her with those 2 old eyes and said very quietly, My dad says everything important is a choice. She didn't have an answer for that. He went to his art class. But when she was cleaning the East Wing corridor that afternoon and heard the front door open, she looked over the banister and saw Min-jae standing in the entrance hall watching his son come home, and for just a second, before the phone in Min-jae's hand buzzed and his expression closed again, she saw something on his face that looked like the same thing she had felt sitting on that bed. She looked away before he could catch her looking. It was Mrs. Park who came to her 3 days later with the new arrangement. Mr. Kang had restructured the boys' care schedule. The nanny's hours were being adjusted to morning only. For the afternoons, Lee had refused every option presented to him, and had made a single request with the focused stubbornness that his father apparently recognized as non-negotiable. So beginning the following Monday, Amia would spend 2 hours each afternoon with Lee, helping with homework, overseeing his snack, accompanying him to his activities, in addition to her existing cleaning rotation. Mrs. Park said it with the same flat efficiency she said everything. Then she added, Mr. Kang said to tell you this is entirely your choice. If you prefer your original rotation, that will be respected. Amia thought about the boy counting crackers. 2 orange ones and 4 plain ones. I'll take the new hours, she said. She told herself it was just an adjustment to the schedule. She told herself it was temporary and practical, and it meant nothing except that a 6-year-old had strong opinions about crackers. She told herself this on the first afternoon when Lee sat across from her at the small study table, and read his Korean characters aloud and looked up after each one to make sure she was listening, and she was every time. She told herself this on the 3rd afternoon when he fell asleep on the sitting room sofa mid-story, his hand tucked under his cheek, looking finally like a boy his actual age. She told herself this on the 7th afternoon when Min-jae came home at 6 instead of 9 and stopped in the doorway of the sitting room and found Lee asleep and Amia quietly tidying the books from the floor, and their eyes met in the lamplit stillness, and he said nothing for a moment, just looked and then said very quietly, Thank you. 2 words. That was all. She nodded and left the room. She did not tell herself anything after that. She just went home and heated up dinner for her mother and younger sister, and didn't think about the way a room could change temperature when someone walked into it. The first thing Seo Ji-yeon did was subtle. Amia might not have noticed it at all if she hadn't grown up learning to watch for exactly this kind of thing. It started with the supply request forms. Amia submitted them every Friday, cleaning products, linens, restocking items for the service areas. The requests went to the household inventory coordinator, who approved them and sent the order. It was a simple system. It had been simple for 3 months. Then one Friday the order came back with 2 items removed and a note attached saying the items had been flagged as unnecessary by Miss Seo's household committee, who would now be consulting on all domestic expenditure above a certain amount. Amia read the note twice, then put it in her file and ordered the items through a different budget line. The following week, there was a scheduling conflict. One of the shared cleaning shifts had been moved without notice, and the new time overlapped with Lee's afternoon hours. When Amia went to Mrs. Park looked at the new schedule with a faint expression and said that the change had come from above her. Amia said nothing. She rearranged the shift and absorbed the extra time herself. The week after that, one of the other maids, a quiet woman named Hannah who had been kind to Amia from the first day, was moved to a different part of the house. Her replacement was a woman Amia didn't know who arrived with the particular quality of someone who was being paid to observe as much as to work. She asked questions that were slightly too specific. She lingered in rooms slightly too long. She was not sloppy about it, but she was not as careful as she thought she was. Amia noticed. She said nothing. She cleaned her section. She went to Lee's afternoon hours. She kept every surface of her work clean. But she also started being careful. She had learned this from her grandmother. Not from anyone she would name out loud. Not from the part of her history she kept folded away and never unfolded, but from her grandmother specifically, who had taught her that the most dangerous people are never the ones who come at you directly. The ones who come at you directly are afraid of you. The ones to watch are the ones who rearrange the room slowly, patiently, until the space you're standing in gets smaller and smaller, and one day you look up and there's no room left. So Amia watched. She kept her face pleasant and her work impeccable, and she watched. She was in the East Wing corridor on a Tuesday afternoon when she heard Ji-yeon's voice through a slightly open door. She wasn't eavesdropping. She was cleaning the corridor. The door happened to be open and the voice happened to carry. She heard Ji-yeon say on the phone, in a tone that had completely abandoned warmth. She's been there 4 months. He won't move her directly because of the boy. So we need another approach. Something that makes it her choice, not his. A pause. Then her family. Find out what she's protecting. Everyone has something. Amia kept moving. She cleaned the next door handle without slowing her pace. She finished her corridor, went downstairs, completed her remaining tasks, and clocked out at the normal time. She sat on the bus home and looked at her hands in her lap. Her family. Her mother's medical costs. Her sister's school fees. The modest apartment they rented that was one missed payment from becoming a problem. Ji-yeon had said, "Find out what she's protecting." She already knew. And so did Amia. That was what made it dangerous. Not that Ji-yeon would find something obscure or hidden. She would find the most obvious thing in the world, the thing Amia had never tried to hide because it had never needed protecting before. Her mother. Her sister. The ordinary, fragile, precious life she had built around them. The bus lurched at a stop and an older man got on and sat 2 seats ahead, and Amia watched the back of his head and thought about what it costs to be found by the world you left. She had been careful. She had been clean. She had cut every connection, refused every summons, declined every opportunity her grandmother's name could have opened. For 8 years she had worked jobs that required nothing except her hands and her attention and her willingness to show up. For 8 years she had slept without the particular vigilance that came with being valuable to dangerous people. She had earned that sleep. She had built it from the ground up. And now someone was reaching for it with both hands, not because Amia had done anything to deserve it, but because she happened to exist in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a 6-year-old had the inconvenient habit of saying true things in public. Amia had left her grandmother's world at 18. She had left it carefully and completely, with her mother and her sister, and she had spent 8 years building a life that had nothing to do with that world and required nothing from it. She had cleaned houses and saved money and watched her sister study and taken extra shifts to cover her mother's medical bills, and she had been fine. She had been more than fine. She had been free. She did not want to go back. She also knew what it meant when someone started making moves the way Ji-yeon was making moves. She knew what the end of that road looked like. She had grown up watching it. The targeted pressure. The family touched at its most vulnerable point. The offer that came afterward that looked like rescue but was actually a leash. She got off the bus and walked home and made dinner and sat at the table with her mother and her sister and listened to her sister talk about a test she had coming up. And she laughed at the right moments and answered the right questions and did not say a single word about any of it. She went back to work the next morning. It was Min Jae who brought it into the open, and not in the way she expected. She was returning books to the library on a Thursday evening when she found him already in the room. He was standing at the window with a glass of water, not drinking it, just holding it, looking at the garden. He didn't turn when she came in, but he said, "Close the door." She did. He turned then, and she saw that he was very controlled and very tired in the way that men who are always in control get tired when they cannot solve something the usual way. He said, "I want to ask you something directly and I need a direct answer." She put the books down on the nearest shelf and turned to face him. "All right. Has anyone in this household or connected to it done anything that has caused you difficulty? Outside of your normal duties? Anything that has interfered with your work or your situation?" She looked at him. He was watching her with the same careful, assessing attention she had seen on his son's face countless times. They had the same eyes, the same quality of looking at things and seeing them accurately. She said, "Nothing that I haven't been able to handle." He was quiet for a moment. "That's not the same as no." She didn't respond. "Amia." He said her name in a way that meant he needed the actual answer. She said, "Nothing that has interfered with my work." He looked at her for a long time. Then he set the water glass down on the windowsill and said, "Lee asks for you every morning before I leave for work. Every morning. He doesn't ask for his nanny. He doesn't ask for me. He asks where Amia is." He said it as a fact, not a complaint. "I need you to know that whatever arrangements someone else has tried to make, I am the one who makes decisions about my household, not anyone else." She said, "I know that." "Do you?" "Yes." Another silence. Outside, Seoul did its evening things, indifferent and enormous. He said, "My wife died when Lee was 2. He doesn't remember her. He has been assessed by 3 specialists, all of whom have told me that he has an above-average capacity to read people and form attachments, and a corresponding difficulty with disruption of those attachments." He said this with the flat precision of a man who had memorized medical reports. "He chose you. In 4 months he has not chosen anyone else. Not since his mother died." The room was very quiet. "I'm not asking you to be something you're not," he said. "I'm asking you to stay. And I'm telling you that if someone is making it difficult for you to stay, I want to know." Amia stood very still for a moment. Then she said, "She is. I haven't needed to act on it yet. But she is." He nodded once. He picked up his water glass. He said, "I'll handle it." She said, "Mr. Kang." He looked at her. "She isn't careless. Whatever she does, she'll make it look like something else. So if you move against her directly, she'll adjust." She paused. "I'm not telling you how to run your affairs. I'm telling you what I've seen." He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw him recalibrate something. He said, "How have you seen it?" She said simply, "I grew up watching it." She left him with that. She picked up the books she'd come to return, shelved them properly, and walked out of the library. She felt his eyes on her back until the door closed. She walked to the end of the corridor and stood at the window there for a moment, looking at the garden in the dark. The lights along the stone paths were on. They went on automatically at 7 every evening, one of 100 small things the house did without being asked. She had cleaned those paths. She had learned the particular angle of morning light that showed the dust on those stones and the time of day it was best to sweep them. She had learned this house from the inside. That was something she hadn't expected when she took the job. Not the house itself, but her relationship to it. How it had stopped feeling foreign. How she moved through it now with the ease of someone who knew where the difficult hinges were, and which floors creaked, and what the particular sound of Lee's footsteps meant before he appeared around a corner. She thought about what Min Jae had said. "He asks for you every morning before I leave for work." She thought about a man standing outside a library having just said something that clearly cost him something, waiting to see whether she would say something back. She pushed off the windowsill and went to finish her evening tasks. If you've made it this far, you already know this story is different. Like and subscribe and keep watching, because it's about to go somewhere no one expected. It was Lee who found the woman in the garden. Not a woman he knew. A stranger standing near the low east wall on a Saturday morning while Min-jae was at a business meeting, and the security perimeter was relying on cameras rather than a full team. She was dressed in ordinary clothes, the kind that were designed to look ordinary, and she was taking photographs of the garden paths and the service entrances with the practiced patience of someone who had done this before. Lee had come outside for his football. He saw her and stopped. He did not call for the housekeeper. He did not run. He stood 15 meters away and looked at her the way he looked at all things he was trying to understand, and then he turned and went back inside and found Amia in the East Wing hallway. "There's a woman in the garden," he said. "She's taking pictures of the doors." Amia looked at him. "Show me." He led her to the window that overlooked the east wall. The woman was still there. Amia watched her for 4 seconds. The way she stood, the angle she was shooting, the methodical left-to-right movement of her attention across the service entrance and the secondary gate. Not a tourist. Not lost. Someone with a specific brief. Amia took out her phone, photographed the woman through the glass, and messaged the head of security with the image and the location in 4 words. "East wall, needs removal." The security team had the woman off the property in under 3 minutes. Amia knelt down in front of Lee. "You did the right thing coming to find me instead of going closer." "I knew something was wrong," he said. "You were right. She was here because of you, wasn't she?" He said it without drama, just the flat observation of someone assembling facts. Amia looked at his face, that serious 6-year-old face with its 2 old eyes, and did not lie to him. "Probably." He thought about this. "Are you going to leave?" "No. Promise." She put her hand on his shoulder. It was warm and slight under her palm. "I'm not going anywhere, Lee." He looked at her for a long moment, checking her face the way he checked everything. Then he nodded and went to find his football. Amia stood up and called her cousin. She had not called that number in 4 years. Her cousin answered on the second ring with the immediate alertness of someone who had been waiting for a call that might come from that number without knowing when. "I need some information," Amia said. "Nothing more than that. No action. Just information." "About who?" "Seo Jeon. Specifically, who she uses for work like this. The woman who was just removed from Min-jae's property. I need to know who sent her and what the brief was." Silence on the other end. Then careful. "You're working in Kang Min-jae's house?" "Yes." "Amia. I said information only. Nothing more." Another silence. "Give me 2 hours." She hung up. She went back to work. She cleaned the West Wing bathroom with precise attention to the grout lines and thought about what her grandmother used to say about fire. The best way to stop it is to know where it starts, not where it's burning. The information came back in 1 hour and 40 minutes. The woman in the garden had been sent by a private security firm, connected to Seo Jeon's family through 2 intermediaries. The brief had been to document entry and exit points and identify the daily schedule of household staff. Not surveillance for the sake of surveillance. Preparation for something that would happen next. The firm had done similar work twice before for Jeon's family in the past 18 months. Both times, the target had been a person the Seo family wanted removed from a specific situation without direct confrontation. Both times, the person had eventually left. Amia read the message twice. Then she forwarded it to the head of security and to one other number. Min-jae called her 20 minutes later. "Where did you get this?" "From someone I trust." "Who?" she said. "That's not information I'm sharing. What matters is that it's accurate, and you can verify it independently." A long pause. "You have connections you haven't mentioned." "I have a cousin," she said. "That's all I used. A cousin who can find this in under 2 hours." She didn't answer. He said, "Amia." The way he said it was different from all the previous times. Quieter. more careful. Like something had shifted in the room even though they weren't in the same room. I left that world when I was 18, she said. I built something else. I came to work in your house because it was good work and I needed the money and I had no other reason than that. She paused. I still have no other reason than that. But I'm not going to pretend I don't know things, or that I can't find things, when the situation needs it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Are you safe? Your family. The question surprised her. She had expected something harder. Questions about her background, about who she was connected to, about what it meant for his security that she had access to his house and sources like that. She had been preparing answers for those questions on the bus ride home the night she overheard Ji-yeon's phone call. She had laid them out in her head, clean and honest, the truth and nothing more than the truth. She had not prepared for, Are you safe? She said, For now. Yes. I want that to remain the case. So do I. Another silence. Outside her window she could hear Seoul in the evening, all its indifferent noise, all its moving on. He said, I'm canceling the dinner scheduled with the Seo family for next week. She said nothing. I should have been paying closer attention, he said. I was managing the arrangement as a business calculation. I stopped paying attention to what was actually happening inside my own house. His voice had the quality of someone making an assessment out loud, not seeking her response. That's not something I would typically allow, she said. You were paying attention to your son. I was going to meetings. A pause. You were paying attention to my son. The line was quiet between them, and the quiet had weight. She said, Mr. Kang. He said, Min-jae. She stopped. You've been in my house for 4 months, he said. My son chose you at a dinner table in front of 50 people. I think you can use my name. She said after a moment, Min-jae. Go home, he said. Be with your family tonight. I'll handle what needs handling tomorrow. You should be careful how you handle it. If she feels cornered. I know. And the way he said it, she understood that he did know, that this was not a man who didn't understand the dynamics of people being cornered. I've been doing this for a long time, Amia. She said. I know. They were quiet together on the phone for a moment, which was different from the other times they had been quiet. This was the silence of two people who had moved into the same space and were still adjusting to how much room there was. He said, Good night. She said, Good night. She sat on her bed after the call and pressed both hands against her knees and breathed the way she breathed when she was pulling herself back from something. Not from fear. From the particular feeling of something important happening that you haven't decided yet how to hold. She went and ate dinner with her family. Her mother asked about her day in the cheerful oblique way she had of checking without pressing. Her sister showed her 3 pages of biology notes and wanted feedback on her diagrams. Amia gave it. She was present for all of it. She ate everything on her plate. She did not sleep particularly well. What happened over the next week happened in several stages, and Amia only knew parts of it directly. She knew that the Seo family dinner was cancelled. She knew that Ji-yeon called Min-jae's personal number 4 times on the day the cancellation was communicated, and that he answered none of them. She knew that 2 of Ji-yeon's people attempted to access the household's administrative records through a contact inside the company's HR department and were blocked, and that the contact was quietly let go the following morning. She knew that Min-jae made 2 phone calls she wasn't privy to, and that afterward the private security firm connected to Ji-yeon's family quietly closed their file on the Kang property and returned their documentation without being asked. She knew these things because Mrs. Park told her 2 of them, and because the new atmosphere of the house told her the rest. Houses had atmospheres the way people had body language. This one had been tense in a particular way for weeks, the kind of tension that comes from something unsettled moving beneath the surface, always just below the level of what you could name. That tension was gone. What replaced it was different. Not the absence of tension exactly. More like the particular feeling of a room after a window has been opened. The air the same. The light the same. But something moving again that had been held still. We noticed first the way he noticed everything. He was doing his homework at the study table on a Wednesday afternoon when he put down his pencil and looked at Amia and said, "Is the bad woman gone?" Amia looked up from the book she was reading. "Who?" "The one who wanted you to leave," she said carefully. "What makes you think there was someone like that?" "Because I'm not stupid," he said pleasantly. "And because Mrs. Park's face changed. It used to do a tight thing when certain names came up. It doesn't do that anymore." She looked at him for a long moment. 6 years old and cataloging the facial expressions of the household staff. "She's gone," she said. "It's handled." He nodded with the satisfaction of someone whose assessment had been confirmed. "Good." He picked up his pencil. Then very casually, as though it were a minor footnote, "Dad likes you, you know. I can tell because he comes home earlier now." "Lee, I'm just saying facts." He wrote something in his workbook without looking up. "He came home at 6 3 times this week. Before you he came home at 9. That's a 3-hour difference per day." He looked up. "I did the math." She pressed her hand over her mouth. "That's 15 extra hours per week," he said. "In case you were wondering." "I was not wondering." "You should be," he said, and looked back at his workbook with the air of a man who had made his point and considered the matter settled. She went back to her book and did not allow herself to smile for a full 30 seconds. That evening, Min-jae came home at 6:15 and found them still at the study table, Lee reading aloud from a chapter book while Amia listened with the same careful attention she gave to everything he brought to her. He stood in the doorway for a moment before either of them heard him. He stood there long enough that she could see, when she finally looked up, that he had been watching them with an expression that he hadn't had time to close. Lee looked up. "Dad, Amia reads faster than me but she never says so." "That's very diplomatic of her." "It's polite," Lee said, with the air of correcting a common misconception. Min-jae's mouth did something that was not quite a smile but was in the same family. He said, "Dinner in 30 minutes. "We'll be there," Lee said and went back to his book. Min-jae looked at Amia. She looked back. There was something easy about it, that looking, something that had not been there before and was there now without either of them deciding to put it there. He said, "Would you stay for dinner?" She blinked. "Aye." "Amia," Lee said without looking up from his book, "just say yes." "I don't eat with." "We're asking you," Min-jae said. Simply. Without any complexity around it. She looked at Lee. He had not looked up from his book but the corner of his mouth was moving in a way that she recognized as the expression he made when he was trying not to look smug. She said, "All right." It was a quiet dinner. Lee talked about the chapter book and about a boy at school who had said something wrong about football, and Min-jae listened to him with the full, unhurried attention of a man who had learned that this was what was required, and Amia ate and occasionally offered an opinion on the football debate that Lee received with great seriousness. At one point Lee said something that was genuinely funny and Min-jae laughed, and it was a real laugh, not the managed version, and Lee looked pleased with himself in the way children do when they have made their parent laugh the real way. It was an ordinary dinner. That was the thing about it. It was completely impossibly ordinary. Afterward, when Lee was in his room and the dining table was being cleared by the evening staff, Amia was putting on her coat in the entrance hall when Min-jae came down the corridor. He said, "Your family. Are they in Seoul?" "Yes. My mother and my sister." "Your sister is in school?" "Her final year." A pause. "She wants to study medicine." "That's serious work." "She's a serious person." She pulled her collar straight. "She's the reason I took this job." He looked at her. "The pay." "The pay," she confirmed. Then, because honesty had become the register they used with each other. "And also because I needed to be somewhere structured. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't connected to anything else. To prove to myself that I could do that." She paused. "I'm not explaining this well." "You are," he said. She looked at him. He was standing at the right distance, the professional distance, but he was watching her the way he watched things he was actually thinking about, the way Lee watched things, which meant neither of them had ever really learned to look at people any other way. "I left something difficult," she said. "I left it years ago. This job was supposed to be simple. Normal. Evidence that I had built something that didn't require anything from that other world. And then Lee chose you at a dinner table. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. And then Lee chose you at a dinner table. And then Lee chose you at a dinner table. He said it gently. Not mocking. She said. And then Lee chose me at a dinner table. He was quiet for a moment. He's usually right about people. I know. He was right about Jiyeon too. Earlier than I was. He said it the way he said things that cost him something. Not loud. Not apologetic. Just honest about it. I should have listened. I was managing the situation instead of seeing it. She said. You see things clearly. It just takes you longer when you're also the one inside it. He looked at her. That's generous. It's accurate. Another silence different from the ones before. The house around them was settling into its evening sounds. The housekeeper in the kitchen. The security check at the gate. All the small machinery of a house doing what it did. He said, I'd like you to stay. Not as a maid. He said it directly the way he said everything important. I'm aware of how that sounds and I'm aware of the complications, and I'm aware that I am asking something that is not simple. But Lee needs someone consistent and he stopped. Started again. I find that I have been looking forward to coming home, and I don't think that's entirely about Lee. Amia looked at him for a long time. She thought about her grandmother's world, which she had left and which had left its marks on her regardless, the way all the things you leave do. She thought about the 8 years she had spent building something clean and structured and entirely her own, and how that had not been nothing. It had been everything. She had earned it. She thought about a boy who counted crackers and knew she was the one who left them, who had pointed at her in front of 50 people with complete certainty and no hesitation and no doubt, as though the universe would simply have to arrange itself around what he had decided. She thought about the way this man had said, "Are you safe?" The way he had said, "Your family," not as weapons, as genuine questions. She said, "I'm not someone you can manage. I know that. And I'm not doing this for Lee. I mean, Lee matters to me. He matters to me a great deal. But I'm not making a decision about my life for a 6-year-old. I understand. I'm saying I would need this to be about us. Not about the arrangement it creates. Not about what it solves. Not about the schedule it simplifies." She looked at him directly. "About us?" He said. "Yes." She looked at him. "Yes, like you understood what I said. Or yes, like that's what you want." "Both," he said. "Equally." She breathed in. Then out. "I need to think," she said. "Take whatever time you need." She picked up her bag. She walked to the front door. She put her hand on the handle and then she stopped and turned and said, 15 extra hours per week. He looked at her surprised. "Lee told me," she said. He did the math. Something warm moved through Min Jae's face. Not controlled. Not managed. Just there, moving across him the way warmth moves through a house when someone has thought to turn on the heat before it was cold. She opened the door and went home. She thought about it for 3 days. Not in the agonized way, not going back and forth, but in the still, honest way her grandmother had taught her, the one useful thing she had kept from that whole complicated inheritance. You sit with a thing until you know what you actually feel about it, separate from what you're afraid of and separate from what you want to be true. What she felt about it when she sat with it honestly was this: she had spent 8 years building a life that was clean and simple and entirely separate from everything that had come before. And she had done it. She had done it completely. She had proven it to herself. She didn't need to keep proving it. She went back to work on a Thursday morning and found Lee at the breakfast table with his homework still out from the night before, and a slightly guilty expression that told her he had forgotten about it until this exact moment. She sat across from him and helped him finish it before Mrs. Park arrived for the morning briefing, and he ate his cereal and did his work and looked at her sideways every few minutes as though checking whether she was still there. She was still there. She found Min Jae in the library that evening. She knocked, which she always did, and came in when he said to, and he looked up from the papers on his desk and waited. She said, "I've been thinking." He said, "I know. I'm not changing anything about my work. I'm not moving into this house. Not yet. Not until there's reason for Lee to understand what we're doing, and until that reason is real and settled, and not something that can be taken apart when things get difficult. He said, "All right. And I'm keeping my family where they are. My mother and my sister are not part of this until I decide they are." "Of course." She looked at him. "And I want you to understand that the part of my history I haven't told you, I will tell you. All of it. Not because I owe you the whole story immediately, but because you should know who you're dealing with, where I come from, what that means. Whenever you're ready. It might complicate things." He said. "Amia." She looked at him. "I run half of Seoul's most contentious industry sectors, and I'm raising a child alone, and I canceled an engagement that 3 families had political stakes in. I'm not afraid of complicated." She said after a moment. "No. I suppose you're not." He stood up from his desk. He crossed the room and stopped in front of her, close but not touching, giving her the full space of the choice. He said, "I have been going home to a house that felt empty for 4 years. Then you came and the house started feeling like it was waiting for me to arrive." He said it plainly, without ornament, the way he said things he had thought about carefully and meant completely. "That's what I know. That's what I'm sure of." She looked at him for a long time. Then she reached out and took his hand, her fingers around his steady. He looked down at their joined hands. He looked up at her. She said, "Don't make me regret this." He said, "I won't." They stood there in the library with the evening light falling through the tall windows and Seoul moving outside indifferently and the house settling around them, and it was not a dramatic moment. It was a small, decided, irreversible one, the kind that matters more than the dramatic kind, the kind that you look back on later and think, that was where it actually began. 3 months later, Lee walked into the kitchen on a Sunday morning and found Amia at the stove and his father already seated at the table with his coffee and the newspaper he never had time to read during the week, and he looked at the two of them with the patient expression of someone whose assessment had finally been officially confirmed. He sat down and said, "I told you." Min-jae looked at him over the top of his cup. "You did. At the dinner. In front of everyone." Lee helped himself to a piece of fruit from the bowl in the center of the table. "I was right. You were right." "I usually am," Lee said without arrogance, just accuracy. Amia set a plate in front of him and looked at Min-jae, and he looked back at her. And the morning moved around the 3 of them the way mornings do when they belong to you, steady and quiet and full of the particular warmth of a life being built. Lee ate his breakfast and said, "I did the math again." "What math?" Amia said. "You're here 6 days a week now. That's 36 extra hours." He looked up at his father. "Progress." She put her hand over her mouth. Min-jae made a sound that was definitively a laugh, real and warm, the kind that doesn't ask permission, the kind that happens before you can arrange your face. Lee looked satisfied and went back to his breakfast. He had said what he needed to say. He had counted the hours, confirmed the trajectory, and declared the result. The evidence supported his original claim. The case was closed. He reached for another piece of fruit. He chewed it thoughtfully. Then he looked at Amia and said, "You should teach me to make those crackers. The orange ones." She looked at him. "Those are just crackers I buy at the market, Lee. I don't make them." "Oh." He considered this. "Then you should take me to the market." "You want to go to the market?" "I want to see which ones you choose and why." He said it with complete seriousness. "So that when you're not here I can get the right ones." The room went very quiet for a moment. Amia looked at this boy, this small, certain, deeply old-souled boy, who had decided at a dinner table 4 months ago that he knew what his family was supposed to look like, and had simply waited for the rest of the world to confirm it. "Okay," she said. "We'll go to the market." Lee nodded, satisfied. He looked at his father. "You should come too." Min-jae said, "I'll be there." "Good," Lee said. "Saturday." And that was how it was decided. Not with a proposal, not yet, that would come later, on a Sunday evening in the library with the same plain, direct words Min-jae used for everything that mattered, but in the small factual way that the most permanent things in a family tend to get decided. With a child asking for crackers. With 2 people saying yes. Outside, Seoul went on in all its enormous indifference. Buildings and traffic and the particular quality of a Sunday morning in the city, when everything moved at a different speed and the light came at a different angle. None of it was watching. None of it was recording this. But inside this house, something had been chosen. Not by circumstance. Not by arrangement. Not by the weight of obligation or the pressure of two old families deciding what made sense for the empire. By a 6-year-old who had looked across a dinner table with those calm, certain eyes and said the thing out loud before any of the adults were ready to hear it, and had waited, with the extraordinary patience of someone who understood that the truth doesn't become less true just because the adults need more time. He had been right. He was usually right. And in the end, that was how the family formed. Quietly, in the middle of an ordinary Sunday morning, with fruit on the table and coffee getting cold and the boy who started it all counting his hours and finding the number satisfactory, and the woman his father loved standing at the stove listening to both of them, and the man she trusted sitting across from his son in his own house, finally home in the way that counted. If this story moved you, like, subscribe and leave a comment. Tell me, was Lee wrong about anything? Not one thing. See you in the next one.